There is no excuse for James Harden to shoot 8 shot attempts in a Game 7. There is no excuse for the last 4 Game 7s with 4 different teams that James Harden has played with, that he has attempted 51 shots in 4 games, in 4 Game 7s.
Did a great job in the regular season, putting up numbers, one of the top leaders in assists, controlling the tempo, and then all of a sudden, he folded like clean sheets in the postseason. Something that we see him do all the time.
James Harden is one of the best basketball players of all time. He's led the NBA in scoring 3 seasons in a row, nearly averaged 40 points a game at one point, and is widely considered one of the best shooting guards of all time. But there's just one catch. James Harden is absolutely terrible in elimination games. Now, what causes Harden to go from one of the best scorers ever to ice cold in the playoffs, and will this ever change before his career is over? Who's at fault, but more importantly, will James Harden's legacy ever be the same? Before we get to the content, we just dropped another new video on our baseball channel, Uni Diamond Talk. I'm going to leave a link to it in the end screen, and now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. We've been incredible to start the playoffs, hitting on 3 picks to make over $400, and it's gonna get better from here. Use my promo code microphone to get $50 when you make a play of $5 or more on Prize Picks, or just click on the link in the description down below and get my picks through my Instagram at TheFlightMike. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Before we talk about James Harden's career-long struggle in the playoffs, I want to make one thing very clear. I am by no means a James Harden hater, and it's not even a question how legendary James Harden has been in the regular season and in various strip clubs around America. Hate him or love him, you cannot deny Harden's impact on scoring as an art form. The level at which James Harden drew fouls completely altered the game of basketball, and he is an all-time offensive threat. For reference, in the 2018 to 2019 season, James Harden averaged over 36 points per game, the most points per game in a season since Wilt Chamberlain back in 1964, and that's where this legendary video originally came from.
He can go to the free throw line anytime he wants. He's got one of the nastiest handles in the game. You can't stop from getting to the basket. He's shooting threes. He's getting to the hole at will. He gets to the free throw line at will. He's averaging 40.
This video was as hilarious as James Harden's prime. From 2016 to 2020, James Harden started 300 games averaging 32 points per game, nearly 9 assists and 7 boards, all while having an effective field goal percentage of nearly 54%. Whenever I listen to a James Harden hater, if they want to criticize his defense, that's fine. If they want to criticize his playoff performances, that's more than fine. But if you want to sit there and say that the man was inefficient, you're not just wrong, you're borderline insane. It's true he only shot 36% from 3 over this time, but that's pretty solid, especially when you're taking over 11 threes per game. For a moment in time, the Dwayne Wade versus James Harden debate wasn't just real, it was alive and well. Even during this season with the Clippers, during the regular season, at the age of 35, James Harden put up nearly 23 points and 9 assists per game. He's still a phenomenal basketball player. Now, the reason I want to mention all of this is because after I say what I'm about to say, I don't want you to think that I have some vendetta out on James Harden. I love him as a player. I love the way he's revolutionized the offensive side of the basketball. And without a doubt, he'll go down as one of the best players of all time and is without a question a Hall of Famer. But that doesn't stop me from saying that he's been mediocre in the playoffs, especially in elimination games. I wouldn't even say that he's been mediocre in these games. I would go as far as to say that he's downright terrible and a liability to his team. And there's one simple reason why. Now, I do want to point out that James Harden has had some fairly solid playoff moments. For example, who could forget when James Harden dropped 45 points while shooting 60% from the field against the Golden State Warriors in 2015 to extend the Western Conference Finals? Isn't that impressive? Well, it certainly is, but it's less impressive when you remember the fact that this was only an elimination game to begin with, because James Harden had this lousy final possession in game 2 that gave the Golden State Warriors a 2-0 lead. It gets even worse when I remind you that in game 5 of this series, James Harden had 12 turnovers, meaning in this elimination game, Harden had more turnovers than he did shot attempts. It also doesn't help that he shot 18% from the field that game either. You might think this is just a one-off coincidence because there are plenty of times where superstars have terrible games when the lights are brightest. What about a few years later when Harden's Rockets took on the San San Antonio Spurs in the second round of the playoffs. He actually did have a solid Game 3 that series, putting up 43 points with an effective field goal percentage nearing 60% despite losing the game. But what about when it matters most? Well, in Game 6 of that series, down 3-2 and on the verge of elimination, James Harden did the most James Harden thing ever, putting up just 10 points and 6 turnovers, all while shooting sub 20% from the field. Are you starting to see a trend here? Years later with the Philadelphia 76ers, the same thing happened again, as in Game 6 against the Miami Heat, when the Philadelphia 76ers needed James Harden the most, he completely disappeared, putting up just 11 points and 4 turnovers, all while only taking 9 shots the entire game. It's not like he was missing early on either. He shot 43% from 3 that game and over 44% from the field. Why is Harden taking less and less shots in elimination games? Well, what about a year later when Harden dropped another 45-point bomb against the Celtics in 2023 while he was with the Sixers in the second round of the playoffs? That's awesome too, until you remember that the Sixers lost in Game 7 that series, a Game 7 mind you, where Harden had just 9 points and shot 27% from the field. But it gets even worse here. The next year, during his first season with the Clippers, James Harden and Los Angeles found themselves tied 2-2 with the Dallas Mavericks in the first round. Guess what James Harden did next? Well, it's not hard to guess what he did, considering in Game 5 he put up just 7 points, shooting 2 for 12 from the field in a loss. Then in an elimination game down 3-2, he had as many shot attempts as he did points and went 0 for 6 from 3. He was so bad in both of these games, the Clippers didn't even get to a Game 7. And speaking of Game 7s, let's go over each and every Game 7 of James Harden's career, and let's just determine if the narrative around him being bad is true or not. Because James Harden has played in 7 Game 7s throughout his career and is averaging less than 20 points per game while shooting a shocking 35% from the field. In those Game 7s, James Harden's team is just 2-5. But interestingly enough, over Harden's first 3 Game 7s, he's 2-1, averaging over 26 points per game with a true shooting percentage that's over 55%. Another important thing to remember is that during these games, he also averaged 10 free throws per game. Remember this because it's important a little later. In his next 4 Game 7s, Harden has been absolutely terrible, averaging just 13.8 points per game, shooting an abysmal 27% from the field. This right here is where the narrative that James Harden chokes in the playoffs comes from. And honestly, I think it's correct. You can't be a first or second option on your team and then go out and shoot the ball like you're blind. That's something that superstars just cannot get away with. But here's the interesting thing. In those 4 most recent Game 7s, Harden is barely shooting over 5 free throws per game. This is important because a huge part of James Harden's scoring ability is based on him being able to get to the free throw line. If he can't do that, he's missing a large part of his bag. Take, for example, his most recent Game 7 loss, where the Clippers lost to the Denver Nuggets. James Harden just shot 2 for 8 from the field, scored just 7 points and attempted just 2 free throws.
There is no excuse for James Harden to shoot 8 shot attempts in a Game 7. There is no excuse for the last 4 Game 7s with 4 different teams that James Harden has played with, that he has attempted 51 shots in 4 games, in 4 Game 7s.
For some reason, in the last 4 Game 7s, we've seen James Harden attempt less and less shots per game. In fact, since 2020 in Game 7s, Harden has just 13 shot attempts per game. Combine this with the fact his shooting splits have been terrible in those games, and this is a recipe for disaster. But I think we finally figured out why that's the case. Most people blame this on a mental block for James Harden. For some reason in Game 7, the lights are too bright, and he just doesn't score the ball well. While that might hold some truth, that's not the real reason he's been so bad. In my opinion, I think the immense drop-off is because of the referees and the lack of the calls that he's getting. As we've already established, a large part of James Harden's game is getting to the line and being extremely efficient when it comes to shooting free throws. But in the playoffs, things are a little different. Refs let things slide. They stop calling a lot of ticky-tacky fouls, and in some cases just let fouls go without calling them. This is the case even more so in Game 7s when the referees want the game to be decided on the court instead of with a whistle. Let's recall James Harden's first 3 Game 7s to prove this. He was still scoring and was still getting to the line, but not as well as he was was doing in the regular season. Now fast forward, and all of his Game 7 since 2020 have been terrible. What's the difference? Well, personally, I think a lot of it has to do with age. He can no longer go out and give you 50 in a Game 7 because he's lost athleticism, and while James Harden certainly wasn't an athletic anomaly in his prime, in fact, quite the opposite considering people were calling him fat, but still, he's an all-time scoring legend. That has to require some feat of athleticism, and I think a guy who wasn't the most athletic player in his prime is now 35 years old and has lost the majority of the athleticism that he had to begin with, or he's just simply getting tired in these games. This is why I think James Harden has been terrible in Game 7s. He's not getting the whistle he usually does due to the situation of the game, and the fact that he's losing the battle with Father Time. But now that we've already established this, it's time for harder questions. What comes next for the Clippers and James Harden? Is James Harden's legacy tarnished? More importantly, can James Harden still win a championship? The Los Angeles Clippers are in a very strange scenario for more reasons than one. First off, I think it's obvious to anyone who watches basketball that relying on Kawhi Leonard, a player with chronic injuries, isn't a good idea. That's not to blame him whatsoever, but strictly from a roster construction standpoint, that's not a good plan to build a contending team. Secondly, James Harden is going into his age 36 season. He is no longer an effective second option, and I think what we just saw from him in the playoffs proves that. But if you ask Clippers president Lawrence Frank, he actually feels good with their core, which honestly doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But if the Clippers are really set on bringing back this core, I think Brian Windhorst has the perfect plan for them.
This is what they can do. Like, I don't think they've got any other options. I do think that they've really appreciated what they got from James Harden this year, and I do think that they are dedicated to Kawhi for 2 more years. It wouldn't surprise me if James Harden opts out of his contract, which I expect him to do, that they look to match his contract length to Kawhi Leonard's.
I think Wendy really nailed it here. I think the Clippers went all in on the Kawhi Leonard era in Los Angeles, and after what can only be described as an underwhelming result, they're kind of tied to Kawhi until the end of his current deal. This is because they don't own any of their first round picks for 5 years, and because they're about to give James Harden a massive 2-year deal once he opts out with his current player option. I think fans can have one of 2 perspectives on this situation. One, you can be happy that the ownership and front office went all in on their superstar and try their best to surround him with talent. Or 2, with the power of hindsight, you can be frustrated that the Clippers wasted all of that draft capital for what can be summarized as an abundance of early playoff exits. As for James Harden, I think we've seen enough to define his legacy. He's about to turn 36 years old, and barring some insane playoff run in his golden years, I think Harden's legacy is solidified. James Harden is one of the best scorers of all time, and is without a doubt one of the best players of our generation. He revolutionized scoring by making free throws a main aspect of his game, and because of that, he became incredibly efficient. Hate him or love him, this is a fact. However, his lack of championship and playoff success is something we can't ignore. For those reasons, I would ultimately put Harden behind Dwayne Wade all time. I know this might come off as hate on James Harden, but it's absolutely not. I think the culture of rings and judging a player based on their championship accolades is the main reason for this. We judge a player too much based on how many championships they've won, and while that is certainly important when it comes to a player's legacy, it's definitely not everything. I think it's fair to say that James Harden's legacy is that of one of the greatest scorers of all time, who for one reason or another never got it done during the playoffs. But who knows, maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think James Harden's incredibly overrated or maybe even underrated. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.